West Bloomfield News, Civic Center TV and 89.3 WBLD Orchard Lake, West Bloomfield, Kego Harbor, Sylvan Lake, 89.3 Lakes FM. It's the Megacast, an hour-long TV and radio streaming show keeping you informed on the day-to-day news. Live from West Bloomfield, we're bringing you the news, updates, and information impacting communities around Michigan. Join our host, Tyler Kieft, as he talks with community members, business leaders, and professional experts about the stories that impact you. You're watching the Megacast on Civic Center TV.
There are many different kinds of noses. Our noses can sniff out all kinds of things. Good things. And bad things. Your nose knows if those sniffles are just a cold, allergies, or COVID-19. So swab it. Test it. It's good to know.
I'm Steve Eiserman of the Detroit Red Wings, and I think every child in Michigan deserves a safe, healthy, and happy childhood. Can we build a state where Children Trust Michigan isn't just a name, but something our kids believe? Please support Children Trust Michigan as the voice for children and families by visiting the website to learn more.
WBLD Orchard Lake and 88.1 WBFH Bloomfield Hills. Today's edition of the Megacast begins now. Welcome to the Megacast, our live daily TV, radio, and streaming show talking about all things Oakland County and the state of Michigan. I'm your host, Tyler Kieft. You can always keep up to date with us and learn more information on all of our partnering stations on TV, on the radio, and on the web here in Oakland County and throughout the state of Michigan on civiccentertv.com/megacast. You'll find a link to every single one of those partnering stations that join us live from 10 a.m. to 11 a.m. Monday through Friday, as well as live to tape in the afternoons, evenings, and over the weekends. All of those stations listed on civiccentertv.com/megacast. In addition, that's the place to go to find all of our full shows and each individual episode on demand, full shows and each individual segment all on demand on civiccentertv.com/megacast. You'll be able to find us whether you're joining us for the entirety of our show and have to miss a little bit of it and come back in and watch the rest of it, or you're only interested in certain segments, certain topics that are really of interest to you. Maybe you're a big fan of following Michigan politics and Michigan's standing in American politics, and Dave Dulio from Oakland University is someone you'd like to hear from on a regular basis from us as we get into the thick of the 2024 presidential election season. He'll be on the show with us later on today, and you can always find those segments on our Megacast page on civiccentertv.com, whether it's politics or business or local events, all of those things, whatever your taste is. We have a little bit of everything going into depth about these different topics each and every day, 5 days a week, live and live to tape. civiccentertv.com/megacast. Another great place to go for these resources on stories across the state of Michigan. If you're a little bit short on time, just want those top stories and a little bit of information, the most important bits of information from each and every one of those stories, is our local news page on civiccentertv.com. There you'll find links to articles making headlines each and every day. We update this page before our live shows, as well as public health updates at the top of the page. Our top story this morning comes from Joe Capoletti at the Associated Press via the Oakland Press. The 2018 Michigan law officially mandating A through F grading systems for our schools is no more. That doesn't mean A through F grades for your kids in the classroom. Those may still apply depending on district's policy. This, however, constitutes grading for an entire school or an entire district on statewide and federal, statewide evaluations on a year-to-year basis, and it's loosely based off of the same grading scale from the federal government. Governor Whitmer signed a bill this week that passed in state Congress repealing a 2018 law that mandated this system that was passed in a 17-hour lame duck session near the end of the Snyder administration's term. That law assessed school performance on an annual basis, and critics of the legislation, including Governor Whitmer, have argued that this evaluation on an A through F grading basis is too simplistic. It doesn't provide any specificity to what these grading scales truly mean, and is essentially a carbon copy of the same federal assessment protocols, and therefore is not necessary to happen in this particular way at the state level. This is also a law that was called redundant in part because of the Michigan Department of Education already having to provide school assessments to the federal government on a scale of 1 to 100, kind of in that same sort of mode as you would have for an A through F grade, thinking, something like 90 to 100 is an A, 80 to 90 is a B, and so on. Why does that have to be an A through F and a 1 through 100 system, both at the same time when they're essentially the same evaluation? That's the question that's been asked by critics of this 2018 law. And on top of that, the federal grading scale of 1 to 100, that is assessed by the state's Department of Education and sent to the federal government on an annual basis. That is made public for parents and is available to compare and contrast performance by your school district versus others in the local area and across the state, as well as across the country. Said Michigan State Superintendent Michael Rice on the A through F grading system, quote, "Schools are complex, and what educators do daily for children is as well. It distills poorly into a letter grading system," and closed quote. While critics of the 2018 legislation called the system too cut and dry, Republicans, in particular in the state's House and Senate, who are opposed to repealing this law, argued that the A through F grading system provided simplicity to help parents better understand their child's performance without having to evaluate further information in a public portal that often was not exactly user-friendly and could find that information tough to come across or tough to understand based on the way it's presented online and presented in public forums. So while some had argued that this system was too simple, others, particularly those that opposed repealing this 2018 legislation in the House and the Senate on the Republican side, the majority party that did enact these laws, argued that that simplicity is actually helpful to parents in having a basic understanding of the performance of their school district and to be able to look at school districts in neighboring areas. Perhaps they're considering school of choice in a nearby community at another school that may have a better grade statewide, a better grade from the federal government. And that could be an evaluative portion of their reviews of their local schools that could impact their child. That's the argument on the other side of this. Full article with supporting materials, more information, and quotes from leadership all across the state of Michigan on education and from the government itself, leadership like Governor Whitmer as well, can be found from the Oakland Press via the Associated Press on CivicCenterTV.com's local news page. Additionally, making headlines today from Arpon Lobo at the Detroit Free Press, some good news out of the state's Supreme Court as Justice Richard Bernstein is set to return to the bench very soon following his leave of absence to seek mental health treatment. Justice Bernstein returns after a 4-week absence in order to treat what he referred to as situational depression. While Justice Bernstein was not fully working during this 4-week period that he was on leave, he had reported before his leave of absence that he would continue to observe cases already in process that were on his docket. In addition, the justice listened into some sessions virtually in order to remain informed on ongoing decisions that the court may be making in the near future as he prepares to return to the bench, so that when he came back, he didn't have to do a whole lot of catching up or abstain from further cases than he already did due to his absence, get right back into it, get back into making these decisions, and have an assurance to the public that there is a full 7-person Supreme Court upon his return. In a statement on his return, Justice Bernstein said, quote, and this is going to be a longer quote, "I want to express my deepest thanks and appreciation for the support of my family, friends, and colleagues as I sought treatment for situational depression. It is my sincere hope that by talking about the issue in the open, free from any needless stigma, we can move closer to a day when anyone struggling can avail themselves of the same quality care that I was blessed to receive. Serving on the Michigan Supreme Court is the honor of my life, and I am humbled each day by the opportunity to serve my colleagues committed to upholding the rule of law. I want to thank them for the grace, patience, and compassion that they have shown me in these past several weeks, and I look forward to our continued service together, end close quote. We welcome him back to the bench. It's always best to have a full 7-person Supreme Court at the state level, but more importantly, to have each individual on the bench at any given time at their best and feeling in good health. So welcome back to Justice Richard Bernstein as he returns to the Supreme Court bench after a brief but very important mental health leave. And again, just another indication that we've seen it in sports, we've seen it now in politics and in government as well. People being open and honest about their mental health, taking leave as is necessary. Another person in our local area that's done that in the sports world has been Austin Meadows of the Detroit Tigers, who has taken multiple leaves of absence over the last year or so that he's been on the team as he deals with anxiety, still on leave at this time. But again, a showing that you can have these issues. These are common across our communities. You are not alone in those issues. And if you need to take that time, you should absolutely take that time, especially if it is available to you through your place of work. So good news from the state's Supreme Court as Justice Richard Bernstein returns to the bench this week. In addition, today, making headlines on our local news page from Mark Hicks at the Detroit News, the fight against those pesky phone calls from pre-recorded and automated telemarketer services now has the power of Michigan's government behind it. Attorney General Dana Nessel announced yesterday that her department is joining a nationwide lawsuit against the company out of Arizona, claiming that this company is responsible for millions of Americans, including Michiganders like you, being bombarded with spam phone calls that range from an annoyance to downright harassment. The lawsuit is an effort of the anti-Robo-Call multi-state litigation task force. Say that 10 times fast, and by the time you're done with it, it'll feel like a Robo-Call itself. This is a multi-state, nationwide effort joined by 51 attorneys general across the union, including ours here in the state of Michigan. The lawsuit accuses Avid Telecom, its president Michael Lansky and vice president Stacey S. Reeves, of violating the Federal Telephone Consumer Protection Act, as well as telemarketing sales rules and other various laws and regulations set against telecom companies. Avid Telecom, who says their services include automated telephone call services, selling voice over IP services, voice over internet protocol services, data collection, phone number listings, dialing software, consultation, and more. The lawsuit claims that this company, through these services, has made over 7.5 billion, that is with a B, 7.5 billion robocalls, or roughly one for every person on planet Earth, to numbers that include those on the National Do Not Call Registry, which is a violation of federal law. In just over a 4-year period between the end of 2019 and the beginning of 2023, the exact period, December of 2019 until January of 2023, that was the time period in which 7.5 billion robocalls made across the U.S. That includes just under 200 million people receiving those calls right here in the Great Lakes State. Said Attorney General Dana Nessel on the lawsuit, quote, "This lawsuit will hold accountable businesses and business owners who knowingly route illegal robocalls through their networks, as well as provide consumers with some relief from those intrusive phone calls." Of course, you can register for the National Do Not Call Registry throughout the state of Michigan and of course federally. Go to donotcall.gov. That's what I was typing up, and that's why I was a little stumbly there, is just trying to make sure I got the link correctly. The website to register for the National Do Not Call list. You can report unwanted calls, verify your registration on the list, register your phone number on the list. It gives you a choice about whether or not to receive any telemarketing phone calls, and you can then, if you do receive them, remind those individuals that you are on the National Do Not Call Registry and they are violating regulations of the American Federal Trade Commission. Especially if they're based in America, they could face some hefty fines or some criminal activity as well on their record. DoNotCall.gov is the place to go for more information. This is through the Federal Trade Commission. Another place you can just go is simply to the Federal Trade Commission's website at ftc.gov. In phonetic code, that would be Foxtrot Tango Charlie.gov, ftc.gov, and use their search function for the Do Not Call Registry to find more information, or the direct link, donotcall.gov. if you'd like to sign up to be part of that registry, especially now we know over the past roughly 4 years, almost 200 million Michiganders have received robocalls, and that is part of the reason why a 51 Attorney General lawsuit has been registered and includes now the state of Michigan as of Tuesday of this week. More information can be found on this matter, including more supporting information from the Detroit News on this story and updates by clicking through the article on civiccentertv.com's local news page. Also making headlines today from Ann Runkle at the Oakland Press on our local news page. Memorial Day weekend in the greater West Bloomfield area will look much different than in years past, with a tradition lost to the pandemic officially said to be gone for good. The St. Mary's Preparatory Academy's Polish Country Fair has been a staple of Memorial Day weekend in Orchard Lake for decades, almost 50 years, over 50 years, drawing hundreds of thousands of people to our flagship area, the greater West Bloomfield area at the corner of Commerce and Orchard Lake Road, for food, drinks, and a massive carnival on the campus of Orchard Lake St. Mary's High School and Academy. The pandemic shut down the fair in both 2020 and 2021, and then again the fair was shut down last year in 2022 following concerns for safety in the wake of the November 2021 Oxford High School shooting that claimed several lives and left others injured as well. School shootings playing a factor in public event security as well, especially in our local area, given that was still very much raw in our minds at that point in time. School officials have now confirmed and have reaffirmed to the Oakland Press that this week that the fair is gone for good, citing public safety concerns in the wake of mass shootings and a growing number of fights and other incidents across these events in years past, particularly over the last decade or so before its recent cancellations. These had been a growing problem and a cause for concern between a consortium of local police and the sheriff's office who had patrolled this event and just trying to keep things neat, orderly, kind, and of course safe for the general public in these local areas, residents and visitors alike. So that causing the end officially of the Orchard Lake St. Mary's Polish Country Fair after well over 50 years of it being a great tradition in Orchard Lake. I grew up in the local area. I had attended that fair a number of times, including over that past decade or so, that they began having these issues and concerns for public safety. And there was a noticeable difference from when I was a young child to when I was in my mid to late teens going to this fair with friends. And part of that I observed because I was older, I was more mature at the time than I was as a young kid going with my parents in the middle of the day versus going at night with my friends when we were in high school and, having a better idea of, the world around me to a certain extent at that young age. That things were different. It felt different. It definitely seemed different. It wasn't necessarily as dangerous as maybe it's made out to be in some accounts. No, but also I didn't see everything. I wasn't there every year. And by the time I stopped going to that event, it ran for almost a decade beyond that point before being ultimately canceled due to the pandemic and now canceled for good. But you see this paralleled with other events locally as well. Yesterday we talked to John Witz, who, of course, is behind Winter Blast in Royal Oak and Arts Beats and Eats. And this year, the second annual Royal Oak Taco Fest was in particular our most notable point of conversation yesterday. And you can find that on civiccentertv.com/megacast. Safety was a big concern. We know in the past couple of weeks, we've had incidences in our local area. Berkeley Days was supposed to be a 4-day-long festival in Berkeley. It was cut off after just 2 days because there were some fights that had broken out. There was allegedly some gun activity. It was later found that there were no guns on the scene. There were some toy guns, but no real guns or no true, tried and true danger to the public in those moments. But concerns were risen. Security was not entirely in place as it maybe could have been to help prevent that sort of an incident. And that's something that's got to be on the top of everybody's mind nowadays, because we see mass shootings in the United States, not just at our schools, but in public places all across the nation in all different kinds of communities and all different demographics across all different shapes and sizes of people. And so public safety becomes a major concern for these large events, especially when you're coming into a smaller community like Orchard Lake, that Orchard Lake Kego Harbor community. It's kind of in a weird border area in that particular spot in greater West Bloomfield. Smaller police departments that need to have help from neighboring departments, whether it be West Bloomfield or not Pontiac, or the Oakland County Sheriff's Office, or other neighboring departments as well, combined with the Kego and the Orchard Lake Police all in one. It's a big undertaking for small departments, for a consortium of departments, and on top of that, you have these concerns that seem to just grow out of nowhere. Social media becomes an impact as well. How do you monitor social media properly to see when these sorts of events, unfortunately, may be coming to play at these big events that happen in our community? All of those are big questions that are understandably concerns of people that are planning public events, especially large events nowadays, and certainly having an impact on the decision ultimately by St. Mary's to officially call the end to their Polish country fair after over 50 years. This entire article that provides even more information from the Oakland Press can be found. Just click through to it on our website, on our local news page, civiccentertv.com. A quick sip and we'll get to our final story today. Making headlines on our local news page from MLive's Matt Durr. The Mackinac Bridge is set to undergo a number of repairs following an incident where a crane collided with the Michigan icon. I'm not talking about the bird. I'm talking about a construction crane. Interesting story here. When a barge carrying a crane ventured under the mighty Mac, they apparently miscalculated how tall that crane was as it smashed into the side of the bridge while in transit. But here's where things get even more interesting. Nobody had noticed the collision at the time. According to reports, including this one from MLive, it was not until the company that was responsible for that barge and for that crane had assessed damages to the crane itself that they realized, we may have hit the bridge, and we need to let the authorities know that the bridge may potentially be compromised due to this collision. This was said to have happened earlier in the month of May, on May 7th, and proper officials overseeing the bridge were notified of the potential collision by the company, and an investigation was begun. Said Mackinac Bridge Authority spokesperson, aptly named James Lake, quote, "There was evidence that the bridge had been struck, paint had been knocked off, some of the structural steel had been scraped, but not to a degree that would be of structural concern." And that's the big point here. Even though this barge with this crane had struck the side of the mighty Mac, the Mackinac Bridge is in no way damaged, at least in a way that is a public safety concern. These are more superficial damages, as was described. Steel had been scraped on some of the structural steel. Paint had been knocked off of parts of the bridge that were impacted by the collision with this particular crane, but it did not do anything that would damage the structure of the bridge or need to cause any sort of closures, at least not at this time. It's potential in the future that as they do some repairs to the bridge, maybe they close a lane, on one side of the road or the other just temporarily to allow vehicles that need to get out there to provide the assistance needed for those basic superficial repairs. But that would probably, in any case, be a temporary occurrence, not something major, not a closing of the Mackinac Bridge altogether. All of those things, there's no indication that that is even in consideration or would need to be in consideration in this matter. Despite the need for repairs due to the collision induced damage, officials say the bridge remains safe for motorists and it should have no impact on the business of what's expected to be a very busy Memorial Day weekend travel season once again, where many will venture across the bridge to Mackinac Island, hopefully collision-free themselves. We encourage you, stay safe on the roads as you're traveling this Memorial Day weekend. Hey, maybe that's beginning today. You're taking an extra long weekend, or tomorrow, or even if you're taking a long weekend that begins on Friday morning or afternoon and you're heading up north, you're heading to the Mackinac Bridge. Wherever you're going, stay safe out there regardless of where you're at on the roads. Be mindful that there's going to be a lot of traffic. It's going to be a busy weekend. Memorial Day is a big travel, tourism, and fun weekend for people here in the state of Michigan. It always is. Stay safe out on the roads, but go out on the roads with some assurance you are perfectly safe on the Mackinac Bridge following this collision that happened earlier on in the month with a construction crane. Again, just superficial damage, according to the Mackinac Bridge Authority spokesperson James Lake. And I'll read that quote one more time just again so you get the full detail that was said by Lake to the Oakland Press. Quote, "There was evidence that the bridge had been struck, paint had been knocked off, some of the structural steel was scraped, but not to a degree that would be of any structural concern. So Mackinac Bridge remains open despite what is kind of an odd story, but an interesting story because of the oddities involved. Luckily, responsibility was taken by this company. They noticed they had some damages that may have been from a collision while on the water and made the proper calls as soon as possible, and the authorities did their proper due diligence to ensure the safety of the bridge then and in the future. So got to give some kudos to them as well for taking that responsibility, taking the high road, doing it the right way, and doing it quickly, especially as we're approaching a very busy weekend and the unofficial beginning of summer here in the state of Michigan. All those stories are making headlines today on our local news page on civiccentertv.com. You'll find those each and every day with updates of news stories that are making headlines all throughout the week, and all those headlines from the previous days as well. And we will keep those up there on that page all throughout the week, all throughout the weekend. And we'll clear that back out on Monday before our next set of shows as you get ready for a new week and a new set of stories every single week here on the Megacast. We have a great show ahead on today's edition of the program. Coming up next, a heartwarming story out of Royal Oak, where a longtime volunteer at the Royal Oak Public Library made one final decision at the end of her life that will continue to have a massive impact on the local public library for a number of years. Sandy Irwin, the director of the Royal Oak Public Library, joins us next on the program. Following her, we'll be joined by Dave Dulio talking politics here in the state of Michigan and across the union as we get into the thick of the 2024 presidential election season. A big announcement is expected this week. How could that impact Michigan? And plus, Donald Trump coming to our local area as well. How big is Michigan going to be in this 2024 election season? That will all be coming up and more. Stay tuned. You are watching and listening to the Megacast.
Like what you see? Beautiful works of art, masterworks of metal, and accomplishments of artistry will be on display near you. All kinds of artists from all walks of life come together to celebrate their skill and appreciate their work's beauty. Hot Works presents the 2023 Orchard Lake Fine Art Show. Stop by July 29th and 30th between 2 and 10 p.m. between Powers and Daly off of Orchard Lake Road.
Now that the vaccine is available for children 5 and up, why do you recommend it?
Kids are part of the community and they can spread COVID.
We're seeing both healthy children getting sick from the virus as well as children with underlying health conditions.
They can easily bring the virus home to other people that are vulnerable and make them sick as well.
This vaccine can change that and keep children safe.
It's essential that your children get vaccinated to protect them, to protect your families, and to protect those in the community around you.
In the face of COVID-19, staying healthy is important.
And now the same is true in the face of flu.
Influenza has the power to infect millions.
But it's easy to protect yourself, your family, and your community.
The flu vaccine is safe and effective. And with COVID-19 still around,
it's essential. Together we can face flu season head on.
Visit michigan.gov/flu.
Welcome back to the Megacast, our live daily TV, radio, and streaming show talking about all things Oakland County and the state of Michigan. I'm your host, Tyler Kieft. You can always stay up to date with us on our Megacast page, civiccentertv.com/Megacast, where you'll find information on all of our partnering stations and their original programming in the 23 hours of the day that they're not joining us live and live to tape on the Megacast Monday through Friday, and find all of our full shows and each individual interview segment on demand as well. So you can watch us on your time, anytime, or of course, you can always join us live Monday through Friday from 10 a.m. to 11 a.m. for the Megacast. Joining us now on the program is the director of the Royal Oak Public Library, where a longtime volunteer unfortunately passed away in mid-February. But on her way out of this life, she made a decision that could continue to impact a number of lives in Royal Oak and at the Royal Oak Public Library for many, many years to come. Joining us now is Sandy Irwin, the director of the Royal Oak Public Library. Sandy, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you, Tyler. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, glad to have you on as we talk about Victoria Dickinson. This is the individual who on February 15th, had passed away at the age of 98. But while she was with us, and for a long time, many of those 98 years that she was with us and in the Royal Oak community, she always loved her local library and volunteered her time there. And so let's begin by talking about Victoria's legacy of volunteerism and helping out at the Royal Oak Public Library. Just how much of an involvement did she have in the library over the course of many years?
Well, I did some research before this interview to find when she had started on the library board. So there was a lot of old binders of old meeting minutes, and found that she had started volunteering on the library board in May of 1991. For many of those years, she served as the president, and then her last meeting was in December of 2006. So that's 15 years on the board, with the majority of those as president, which is a lot of time for somebody to spend volunteering for an organization that she was clearly passionate about.
Yeah, and giving back was something that was always something that was important to her. It had been reported in this article that I first heard about this and from Mike McConnell at the Oakland Press. You mentioned to him that she had put in over 8,000 hours of service as a pharmacist at Beaumont, and that's in comparison to the probably thousands of hours too that she also put in of service at the Royal Oak Public Library. And so that idea of service was so key in Victoria Dickinson's life, and it extended out to after her life as well. As you can see if you're watching at the bottom of the screen, a $50,000 donation was made from Victoria's estate at the end of her life to the Royal Oak Public Library. And while public funding and donations play a big role in this, an endowment like this to the library can certainly go a long way.
It certainly can. As you mentioned, volunteerism was just critical to the person that she was. You said 8,000 hours of volunteerism over at Beaumont. She trained thousands of volunteers. One of the things that was really important to her was education. She was always encouraging people, particularly if they were in tough circumstances, to continue their education. And she encouraged people to use the Royal Oak Public Library and use the resources that are available. It was really important to her that people knew that the resources were there for them and that it was free to people who live in Royal Oak, and it extends out all throughout the network that we're involved in. So all of those things were really important to her, and what a fantastic gift to leave for us. And thinking about, it's $50,000. What do you do with that? We need to take a lot of thought and consideration as to what we want to do with her donation, because she had a very lasting impact on the community through all of her work, not just at Beaumont, but at the library. She headed up the original millage campaign when the city was having some rough times with finances, and they said, okay, library, see if you can get a millage passed. And she headed that up, which has given us stable funding since the early 2000s. So this gift needs to be used in a way that's going to impact people. And I'm not sure what that is yet.
Yeah, but there's already so many different ways that our local libraries do impact the community each and every day, and gets confused in our modern days because of the expansion of technology, because so many people are able to use technology and are so literate in using technology to find information that some do question the validity of libraries in our communities, but they do provide a number of services to people of all different ages all throughout the year. That includes in Royal Oak. So how important is the library, even in today's society, especially in today's society, for helping people connect to information in their local area?
It's extremely important. When you are considering information, we all think that we know what's correct and what's not correct. And we're dealing in a society that is just bombarded with misinformation. The library can help you find resources that show whether or not something is valid. You don't want to cite a source and not know where that came from. It's really important to understand the difference between just information that's spewed at you and information that is valid. The library can help you do that. And I know you mentioned that lots of people have access to technology. Well, that's not always the case. Many people come to the library because they still need access to the internet, to software, and to assistance with all of those things. That's why libraries still have computer labs. That's why we check out laptops and hotspots so people can take them home and use technology at home, because a lot of people don't have those resources still to this day. So wading through the misinformation, finding those valid resources, and then access to technology and Wi-Fi, those are all really important things that libraries provide. Libraries also provide access to ebooks, e-audiobooks. So if you are tech savvy, you can have access to those. We have just hundreds of thousands of materials available to you for free online. So you don't have to subscribe to a service. You can use the library service and have access to so many different things. But like me, I still like a hardcover book. I don't like reading on screens, and a lot of people are trying to have time away from screens. So having access to popular materials through books is still very, very popular and really well-used resource of the public library.
And another great thing that libraries do, and not just in Royal Oak, but all throughout our communities here in Oakland County and beyond, is provide that information provide access to information in a number of different ways. You mentioned some of those electronic resources and resources that just simply connect people to things we take for granted, like the internet in today's world, but it's also providing access to events with guest speakers and about topics of interest in the community as well. And that requires a lot of work from people, both in the library that work there each and every day, but also volunteers. And so as we bring it back to this very generous donation from the estate of Victoria Dickinson, $50,000 donated to the Royal Oak Public Library upon her passing in February, bring it back to volunteerism and the ways that people can get involved in their local library and help their neighbors and help visitors coming in to Royal Oak if they're interested. What sort of volunteer opportunities are available through the Royal Oak Public Library?
Oh, there's a lot of opportunities. We take volunteers from ages 14 and up, and a lot of times the teen volunteers will help with develop with craft projects and getting things ready for our story times. Adult volunteers help with different things in the collection, making sure things are shelved in order, helping us do some research on maybe we're looking for some books that have been lost and misplaced on the shelves, those types of things. One of our big volunteer organizations is the Friends of the Royal Oak Public Library. They are our fundraising arm. So they hold book sales and do other things for us to help raise money. That all comes back to the library. They help support library programs. The Friends are always looking for volunteers. So they have a bookshop that is open 3 days a week, and you can volunteer in the bookshop. You can help sort through the myriad of donations that we receive every week to see if they'll go in the bookshop, possibly on the library shelves, or even to other organizations that are in need of those books. And then we'll pay the Friends for those books. So sorting through all of those things, there's so many different things that people can do to volunteer their time. The Friends are always in need of volunteers, and it's a really great organization that supports the library. So if you're looking to volunteer, go to our website, ropl.org, visit I Want To, and then volunteer, and you can fill out some forms, and we'll get started on your volunteer journey with the library.
As Sandy said, you can go to ropl.org and just go over I Want To and click on library or volunteerism, and you'll find plenty of more information as well as more resources from the Royal Oak Public Library. Again, ropl.org for all the information you need to know about what's going on in Royal Oak, including at the Royal Oak Public Library. Joining us on the program is the director of the Royal Oak Public Library, Sandy Irwin, on today's edition of the Megacast. Sandy, a few more minutes with you. I want to give you an opportunity to let people in Royal Oak and surrounding areas know of any fun events coming up or things they should be watching out for at the Royal Oak Public Library in the near future.
Things they should be watching out for are the summer reading program. So libraries across the nation celebrate reading over the summer It is for a program for all ages. It's designed to start for young people so that they don't lose the information that they gained throughout their school year. It's called Summer Slide, where suddenly you're not reading, you're not doing anything, and all that stuff that you learned last year trickles away. So if you're reading, studies have shown if you read over the summer, maybe 15 minutes a day, that will help you retain that information, but the library makes that fun. So we have events, you get prizes. On the 24th of June, from 10 to 1 outside in Centennial Commons, we will have a summer reading program opening day celebration where people can sign up for summer reading, do a lot of different activities and events. It'll be a lot of fun. Summer reading starts in June and ends in August. You read, you can earn prizes, and like I said, it's for people of all ages, from children all the way through adults. So we're excited that people will be able to read over the summer and join the library for a lot of different fun activities.
You can find all of the information you need to know on those activities by visiting ropl.org. Sandy, thank you so much for joining us today.
Tyler, thanks for having me. Have a wonderful day.
You as well, and a big shout out to all of our local public libraries, whether it is the Royal Oak Public Library or here in our local area, in our flagship coverage area in the greater West Bloomfield area, the great work done by the West Bloomfield Township Public Library and both their branches, the main branch at the Town Hall Complex and at the West Acres branch. Our local libraries play a big role in helping each and every one of us every single day, especially those in disadvantaged positions in the technological age. As Sandy said, access to hotspots, access to the internet, to computers that can impact job applications, paying your bills, access to the news, access to information that many of us nowadays probably take for granted because there's such ease of access on a relative basis. That's not the case for everybody, and these libraries play a huge role in that. So we appreciate Sandy providing us some of that insight into just how big of an impact libraries have, and of course a big shout out as well to the family of the late Victoria Dickinson. She makes a big impact on the city of Royal Oak and their public library in her passing. We'll take a break on the Megacast. On the other side, the presidential election season for 2024 heating up already. A big announcement expected this week. Another candidate already putting their hat in the ring on the Republican side. Plus, the impact of the state of Michigan now, next year, and all the way to November of 2024. Dave Dulio from Oakland University joins us next. Stay tuned. You're watching and listening to the Megacast.
Many people are feeling overwhelmed and struggling with mental wellness these days. So be kind to your mind. Give yourself permission to breathe. Share your feelings. You are not alone. Have hope. Talk to a Stay Well counselor for free confidential help 24/7 through the COVID-19 hotline.
Ronnie started doing prescription pills at the age of 15, and by 19, he died. If your child is struggling with drug use, try not to be too proud to reach out for help. Don't be worried about what the neighbor will think or your family. Just get your child the help they need. Sometimes it's the hard road to take, but the hard road is nothing compared to living with the fact that your child is no longer with you.
There's hope and help at drugfree.org.
Watch Civic Center TV with our brand new live captions. To turn on live captions, go to civiccentertv.com and click Watch Live. In your web browser, click on the Options tab in the top right and find the Accessibilities tab. Then just switch on live captions to heighten your enjoyment of our local programming. Thank you so much for watching Civic Center TV.
Welcome back to the Megacast, our live daily TV, radio, and streaming show talking about all things Oakland County and the state of Michigan. I'm your host, Tyler Kieft. You can always stay up to date with us and our partnering stations, including those community TV and radio stations that join us live and live to tape all throughout the work week. On our website, civiccentertv.com/megacast, you'll find links to all those stations, and that includes more original programming in your local area in the 23 hours of the work week, each day of the work week, Monday through Friday, that they're not joining us live or live to tape for a 1-hour show. And of course, you can always find us live on civiccentertv.com and throughout our network from Monday through Friday from 10 a.m. to 11 a.m. And find us on demand, civiccentertv.com/megacast. Well, we are well underway on the road to the 2024 presidential election, and the season already heating up as we have more candidates putting their hats in the ring, including a big name about to drop today, allegedly, according to reports over Twitter Spaces. Joining us now to talk about that and more is a professor of political science at Oakland University, where he also serves as the director for their Center for Civic Engagement. Dave Dulio is with us again on the Megacast. Dave, thanks for being with us today.
Hey, Tyler, thanks for having me.
Glad to have you on. It's a big day. It's been a big week in American politics, particularly as it regards to the 2024 presidential election. A prolific fundraiser in his own right, Tim Scott, joining the race for the GOP nomination for president. Senator from South Carolina already brought in $2 million in fundraising just in the first 24 hours of his campaign, as that began earlier this week, confirmed by Fox News. And he's not the only one potentially getting in the race this week. The big rumor is that today, Ron DeSantis, with Elon Musk via Twitter Spaces, will announce his run for the 2024 presidential election. You've called this before the worst kept secret in American politics, and today maybe perhaps that secret is no more. When that actually drops, if that is today or if that is in the near future, how big of an immediate impact does that have on particularly Republican politics in America, but also the 2024 presidential election, once it's official that Ron DeSantis is in the race?
Yeah, not much changes, right? I mean, I think that it's more of the same. Ron DeSantis has been running for president for several months now. I think that this is a well-timed or well thought out, at least from their perspective, time to jump in formally. But I don't think it's going to change much in terms of how he approaches the campaign trail or how he approaches talking about other candidates for office, at least in the short term.
And in terms of this particular matter, I think the most interesting thing is the way that he's going about announcing his presidential campaign. It's something we have not seen before, making that announcement over social media, particularly live social media, with another pretty pervasive figure in American politics nowadays, in Elon Musk. So this kind of, for me, triggers something of a different direction or a different norm we'll probably see in the near future in American politics, using social media, much like we saw in the early days of social media around 2008 with Barack Obama. That had a big impact on his campaign. How big of an impact do you believe that this particular way of going about things from Ron DeSantis could potentially have on his early days in this campaign as he tries to gain momentum on President Trump?
Yeah, I think that the reaction that we've seen already about the decision to make this announcement via Twitter Spaces with Elon Musk is it's already creating the buzz that the DeSantis campaign wanted to have. And it's one of those things that they were maybe criticized or laughed at about going about it in this way, but it's still going to get all the attention that they want and that they need. We're talking about it. Every cable news show is going to talk about it. And they're going to pull clips from the Twitter Spaces session that he does with Musk, and they're going to play that on cable news. So you might as well have given a speech, right? I mean, it's the same end result for the DeSantis campaign, but in a different way. And I think it's also worth noting that DeSantis is doing this on Twitter, a platform that President Trump is no longer on by choice, but one that he used very, very effectively in 2016 and 2020 to further his campaign.
Yeah, and what's also pretty interesting about this too is what Elon Musk said talking at the Wall Street Journal's CEO summit earlier on in the week about this particular announcement, saying, quote, "This will be the first time something like this is happening on social media," and in close quote, and included in that statement that it is expected real-time question and answers also for this presumptive candidate for the GOP nomination for President of the United States, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, and what essentially becomes a bit of a taste of a rally, but also not just some video that's being released to the nation and to the world, but interactive too. That's a huge part of this, getting out on day one with people that ultimately may be big in deciding whether or not you become President of the United States.
Sure. I think that, and I think it's also an interesting juxtaposition from that strategy to the tact of the White House, which has really protected the president from questions from reporters and let alone the American people. Right. I think that access is going to be really interesting to watch, whether or not the DeSantis campaign continues down this road. I'd also like to know how live and in person these questions are really going to be. Are they curated? Are they stacking the deck? Right, which is a tried and true method of political candidates. Right, I mean, and those in office. Right, so that's what they're advertising it as. I'd like to know a little bit more about the details there.
Yeah, the thing about Twitter Spaces is it's not really that open forum where you're not on a Zoom call where you're raising your hand in the chat or something and then saying your question. You're not let in to speak. You're not going to be speaking, and there aren't those live comments either. People will make the commentary on Twitter, which will also be interesting and draw a lot of eyes to the DeSantis campaign on day one. But I would imagine, as you said, very curated, very well thought out who gets in to ask these questions, whether they're media or from the public or other political figures.
Yeah, I totally agree. That's just smart politics, right? I mean, I think that all candidates want to have control, right, over the message, and this is, I think, going to allow them to do that while having the appearance of being much more open and transparent than other strategies, maybe.
And you mentioned earlier, which was interesting, the juxtaposition of this, by comparison, much more open way to announce your presidential campaign and to discuss the issues with the public than what we're seeing from the White House. What impact does this have on Joe Biden's campaign? Because now you have that commentary that's now going to really shift into high gear of, well, the Republican candidates are out in the open. They are speaking to the public. They're being open about their opinions about the campaign. And Biden and the White House are being very closed off. They're being very strategic with how they speak. How does that speak really to the difference in strategy between the Republicans trying to unseat a sitting president and the Democrats trying to hold on to political power in the federal government?
Yeah, I don't think it will change what the White House does or the Biden campaign, right? I think that, if anybody on their team gets asked about it, I think they're going to say, the Republicans are going to do their thing and they're going to run through this primary and we're going to run our own race and run our own campaign. And I think that's probably the smart response. I think the last thing the White House wants now is for Joe Biden to get dragged into some sort of rhetorical battle with Ron DeSantis, or there start to be comparisons made between, how DeSantis is handling the press versus how Biden is handling the press. Because frankly, I think the DeSantis would come out looking better. I think it's also interesting to note that the 2020 campaign, right, waged in the throes of COVID, it was one where Biden wasn't out front like he's going to have to be this time around. I think that there's going to be more expectation for more public displays, right, of the Biden campaign and for him to be out there talking to voters, talking to the press. And so it'll be really interesting to see how they navigate that.
Yeah, I think both sides are kind of implementing a similar strategy, just at different points in time in this campaign. I think right now, as you said, the Republican strategy is get out in front, say these things now, and the Democrats staying back, saying, we'll let the Republicans and these two juggernaut candidates in DeSantis and Trump kind of sink their own ships and have to play catch up while we stay in place. And later on, as you get into the actual Democrat versus Republican one-on-one election season, the Republicans hoping for a bit of the same, getting Joe Biden out in public and having to actually face him answering questions off the cuff from the public and speaking to people in America about his presidential campaign.
Yeah, I tend to think that anytime you've got an incumbent running for re-election, and this is for president or really any office, right? When you've got an incumbent running unopposed, and I don't think that RFK Jr. Is a threat to the president, right? I mean, it's Joe Biden's nomination. He's gonna get it. But when you've got a contested primary on the other side, that really helps that incumbent, right? Because the Republicans are going to spend months, more than a year, beating each other up, punching each other in the face, and that's going to just damage all of them, Trump is going to get his licks in on DeSantis and vice versa, and Nikki Haley and Tim Scott are going to go after both of them, and that's going to damage whoever emerges from the Republican primary, and that's going to be interesting to watch how they try to repair that damage as they go in and go up against Joe Biden.
And all this is going to have a big impact on Michigan, on Michigan's politics, and Michigan's going to have a big impact on the national level. We're already seeing that happening now in the early parts of the campaign, as President Trump is expected to speak in the month of June at the local Oakland County Republican Party's Lincoln Day dinner on June 25th, where he'll be awarded their Man of the Decade. Not just the state of Michigan having a big impact on the overall election season, but right here in Oakland County, a very consequential part of a very consequential state in the presidential election. Just how big of a role does Michigan have in this right now, and will continue to have from this point to the end of the November election in 2020?
Yeah, Michigan's always important, right? I mean, I think that you're seeing attention paid to Michigan. I think you're going to see that continue. There's no question that Trump likes it here and has visited many times and over the course of his campaigns. I think you'll see Ron DeSantis make more of have his presence felt more here. I think that it's, and in the general election, Michigan's going to be a competitive state again. It always is. And there's going to be 15 electoral votes up for grabs that both candidates are going to covet. And, it's going to be one of those wall-to-wall TV commercial fall of 24 like we normally have.
And all this going to continue to have a massive impact on our own state's politics. We're going to be a focal point of this 2024 presidential election. Both the state of Michigan and us right here in Oakland County, a focal point within that focal point. Dave, thank you so much for joining us as always.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Oakland.edu/CCE, a great place to go, a great resource during this election season for public conversations on the issues that are making this presidential campaign here in Michigan and across the union. They will have discussions, they'll have expert panels and more all throughout the election season, and they do all throughout the year, whether it's an election year or not. Oakland.edu/CCE, the place to go for all of that. Big thank you to Dave Dulio as well as Sandy Irwin from the Royal Oak Public Library for joining us on today's edition of the Megacast. We thank you for joining as well. And a huge thank you to our crew, Jared Clark at the studio of My Michigan TV, and our director as always, Calvin Brown at the studio of Civic Center TV, our flagship station. Till next time, I'm Tyler Kieft. Take care of each other, and we'll see you very soon.